One morning, as the rain poured down unexpectedly, James just wanted to lose himself in the arms of the woman he once loved. But when he stepped inside the house, everything changed forever. Emily and Michael, his wife and her boss, were there, tangled in a brutal betrayal. How could he possibly accept this truth? And will James rise to face the storm of emotions that's now consuming him? Before continuing the story, tell me which city you are watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. From an early age, I learned to rely on myself. My father passed away when I was 7, and my mother worked tirelessly to keep us afloat. She had a knack for juggling, from bookkeeping to waitressing, and still managed to keep the house running smoothly. Though she seldom complained, the strain showed in the lines of her face. Watching her navigate life's hardships with quiet strength left a lasting impression on me. It's probably why I've always valued independence and resilience in others, qualities I thought I saw in Emily when we first met. My teenage years were unremarkable, though I excelled academically and managed to stay out of trouble. College offered a chance to reinvent myself. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in law while working part-time to cover tuition. The work was grueling, but I thrived under pressure. It was during my 3rd year that I met Emily. She was vibrant, outspoken, and seemed to understand my drive. We clicked instantly, and by the time I graduated, we were inseparable. Marriage felt like the next natural step, and I truly believed we were building something solid. The early years of our marriage were, in many ways, idyllic. Emily's energy complemented my steady determination. We traveled when we could, explored new hobbies, and even considered starting a family. Yet as my career gained momentum, cracks began to show. Emily often complained about my long hours, and though I tried to make time for us, it never seemed to be enough. I hoped things would improve if I worked harder. If I could secure a big promotion, maybe we'd finally have the stability she craved. I was wrong. About 2 years ago, Emily started pulling away. It was subtle at first: missed dinners, excuses not to join me at social events, a growing preference for spending time with friends instead of me. I chalked it up to the normal ebb and flow of a relationship, but deep down I sensed something was off. Whenever I broached the subject, she brushed it aside, claiming I was imagining things. I wanted to believe her, so I buried my doubts and focused on my work. The turning point came when she started avoiding our Saturday routines. Golf had always been a shared pastime, but suddenly Emily seemed to have better things to do. She dismissed my invitations with vague explanations, leaving me to hit the course alone. I convinced myself it was temporary, that she just needed space. Looking back, I realized I was in denial. The signs were all there, I just didn't want to see them. By the time that fateful Saturday arrived, my optimism had worn thin. The rainstorm felt like a metaphor for the state of my marriage. Unpredictable, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Still, I had no idea just how much my world was about to change. Growing up, my mother had a deep fondness for a country song titled "I've Always Loved the Rain." Its melody was infectious, and even now, fragments of the tune occasionally resurface in my thoughts. Ironically, I've always detested rain. It ruined outings to the park, postponed baseball matches, turned routine drives into hazardous tasks, and most painfully illuminated a betrayal I wish I could forget. One Saturday morning, as I prepared for my usual round of golf, the weather took a sudden turn. A storm crept in unexpectedly, bringing with it heavy rainfall and distant rumbles of thunder. While I'm far from a professional golfer, the sport is my escape, a way to enjoy fresh air and unwind. My wife Emily used to accompany me on occasion, but about a year ago she began discovering more exciting ways to spend her weekends. With the downpour intensifying, I decided to cut my game short and head home. What I found upon my return shattered any illusions about Emily's so-called better ways. The moment I stepped inside, I saw Emily and her boss, Michael, tangled together on the couch, barely dressed. Fortunately for them, my golf clubs were still in the car. As they scrambled to throw on clothes, I stood frozen in shock. Emily finally turned to me, her hands defiantly on her hips. "Aren't you going to say anything?" she demanded. "Yeah," I said, 2 words, "Get out." I moved aside, leaving the door open. Michael bolted without hesitation, but Emily stayed rooted to the spot. "You too," I added firmly. "I'll pack your stuff and leave it in the garage. I'll let you know when you can pick it up." Tears filled her eyes. Can't we talk about this? I made a mistake. I don't have anywhere to go. Go with him, I replied coldly, because I'm calling his wife. Once Emily was gone, I sat in silence, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. After some time, I picked up the phone and called Michael's wife, Sarah. Her reaction didn't surprise me. I had a feeling something was going on, she admitted. I found your number on his phone bill, but he swore it was work-related. Our conversation was cut short when Michael walked in, but Sarah called me back later. Both of us were furious. To hell with them, I said. They deserve each other. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. Let's meet up tomorrow. We can swap notes. I'm planning to contact a lawyer first thing Monday morning. The next day, ahem. We met at a cafe. Sarah was visibly pregnant, which only deepened my anger. Divorce attorneys can push for the guilty party to cover legal fees, I said, sliding her a list of cutthroat lawyers. And for the record, I seriously considered using my golf clubs on them. She managed a small smile. That might solve one problem, but it'd give you a bigger one. We brainstormed strategies for a while. I mentioned that I'd found incriminating emails in Emily's account, but hadn't been able to bring myself to read them yet. Sarah came up with a practical solution. She'd come with me when Emily picked up her belongings, and I'd do the same for her when Michael was home. Before we parted, I offered a bit of advice. Go to the bank, leave a little in your checking account, and move the rest. She smirked. Already handled thanks to online banking. I couldn't help but laugh. How'd you think of that? She shrugged. Sometimes I'm the one with better ideas. I realized I had no idea whether we even had online banking set up. Emily had always managed our finances. Let's grab some lunch, Sarah said. Afterward, I'll help you figure out your computer. Grateful, I agreed. Maybe you should leave a little money in your account, I suggested cautiously. Her expression darkened. Why would I do that? Hear me out, I said quickly. If you take everything, it could come across as vindictive. Leaving a small amount could make you look more reasonable in court. She sighed heavily. I don't have the luxury of playing nice. I'm about to have a baby, and my husband was off fooling around with your wife. I chuckled at her frustration. Okay, fair enough. How about this? I'll help you paint the nursery tomorrow if you help me with my computer today. She grinned. Deal, but let's eat first. I'm starving, and trust me, you don't want to deal with me hungry. After lunch, where Sarah ate more than I thought humanly possible, we headed back to my place. She quickly located my financial software and moved some money. Then she let out a sharp gasp. When I came to see what was wrong, I froze. On the screen was a video of Emily and Michael. They filmed themselves, Sarah said, disgusted. There are a ton of these. She started burning the videos to a disk just as my phone buzzed. Emily was calling. I handed the phone to Sarah without hesitation. Want to take this one? With pleasure, she replied, her voice icy. Into the phone, she said, You're a real piece of work. I'm about to have a baby and you're sleeping with my husband. Don't worry, we're packing Michael's things right now, and next, we're heading to your place. I struggled not to laugh as Sarah paused to listen. Emily wants to know if she can grab her work files from your computer, Sarah said, covering the phone. I smirked. Tell her she can have the whole thing. I'll leave it on the porch Wednesday. Sarah relayed the message and added, and James says Michael should get ready to hear from some of his old clients soon. When she hung up, she looked thoughtful for a moment, then shook her head. I hope those two keep their little thing going. They deserve each other. She turned back to the computer while I reset the alarm code, just in case Emily tried anything. Later, we swung by Staples to grab new computers and an external hard drive. Sarah downloaded everything from my system before I dropped her off around 10 p.m. As rain drizzled outside her house, she turned to me. We need to stay alert, she said quietly. I frowned. Why, they're both liars, she explained. I wouldn't put it past them to try and twist this against us. The thought hit home. Great, so now we're the bad guys, she laughed. A lawyer with a sense of humor, who knew? I'll be here tomorrow to help with the nursery, I promised. And if you need me for the delivery, just say the word. Her eyes glistened with gratitude. Thanks, let's just survive tomorrow first. I walked Sarah to her front door and offered to check around the house for anything unusual. Everything seemed secure, and she'd already updated her alarm code. As I turned to leave, I said, I'm going to the bank and the courthouse tomorrow. Want to file the paperwork together? She shook her head. I still need to hire a lawyer, but I'll make sure Michael can't touch our accounts. I can't officially represent you, I replied, but I can help you get started. I'll draft some paperwork you can file yourself. She nodded, so I handed her some forms I'd already prepared. Take a look when you get a chance, I said. I claim 2/3 of the assets since I'm the primary earner. I don't know your finances, but I doubt Michael's salary as a school counselor paid for your house. Sarah smirked. No, I'm the breadwinner. I make 10 times what he does as a programmer. I laughed. Guess that explains why he ran off with my wife. He wanted to revisit his humble roots. Sarah chuckled. Judging from those videos, they're visited plenty. Maybe we should bring a copy to the next school board meeting. We didn't act on her suggestion, but on Monday I did meet with Detective Lieutenant David Cooper, an old adversary. He barely glanced up when I walked into his office. What do you want now? He barked. I've paid my alimony. This isn't about that, I said calmly. I need to submit some evidence. It's for a civil case, not a criminal one. He eyed me warily as I handed him a CD and asked for a receipt. After sealing it in an evidence bag and documenting the chain of custody, he asked, how long do I hold on to this? Hopefully not long, just a couple of days, I replied. I trust you'll keep it safe. Mangrove didn't like me, and I understood why. Years earlier, I had represented his ex-wife in a nasty divorce case, only to learn later she'd lied and damaged his reputation. Though I tried to make amends, the damage was done. Still, I trusted him to handle this impartially. Shaking off the memory, I met Sarah at the bank. Together, we opened new accounts and left a small balance in the joint ones to satisfy any legal scrutiny. The bank manager mentioned that someone had already tried to withdraw funds and stormed out when they discovered the accounts were nearly empty. They should have been faster, Sarah said with a sly smile. He had no trouble rushing to your house. An hour later, we filed for divorce at the courthouse. The $170 fee was worth every penny, and we arranged for a constable to serve the papers on Tuesday, the last day of school. It felt poetic. Afterward, we treated ourselves to lunch and a trip to Lowe's, where we picked out paint for the baby's room. The outing took longer than expected because Sarah, easily fatigued, needed frequent breaks. Throughout the day, voicemails from Emily and Michael piled up, but we deleted them without listening. I didn't need to hear Emily's excuses, and Sarah had no interest in Michael's justifications. On Monday and Tuesday, I painted the nursery a soft beige with pale green trim. Sarah rolled her eyes when I joked that the green perfectly matched baby poop. By Wednesday morning, I remembered my promise to return Emily's computer. As I opened the door to leave it on the porch, I was startled to find her standing there. It's not even 7 a.m., I said, blocking the doorway. You had me served at school, she snapped, her voice dripping with accusation. I didn't have your address, I replied. That was the most efficient option. I spoke to a lawyer, Emily said. We didn't commit infidelity. It was our first time kissing, touching, but nothing more. So you never slept with Michael, I asked. Never, she said emphatically. I nodded. I'll keep that in mind. I want to come home, she added, her voice trembling with emotion. I think that's a great idea, I said, watching a glimmer of hope flicker across her face. You can have the house. I'll move out and take what I want. If there's anything missing that you need, let me know. You can move in Sunday at noon. Her face fell. I don't mean the house, she said softly. I mean us. There's no us, I replied firmly. The house is paid through September, and I'll give you $1,000 a month in alimony for 2 years, 1 month for every month we were married. That's my final offer. Her expression hardened. If you won't reconcile, I'll see you in court. I'll take half. Later that day, I stopped by Sarah's house where she met me at the door, visibly fuming. You just missed Michael, she said angrily. He's demanding half of everything. I almost told him about the videos. Don't waste the surprise, I said. Let him lie under oath. We'll dismantle him. Still, I hope they accept our offers. By Tuesday evening, Sarah and I had finalized our settlement proposals. While she wanted to leave Michael with nothing, I cautioned her that courts rarely allow one party to be stripped entirely, and our exes might reject even generous terms. Emily's sudden desire to reconcile was clearly driven by financial desperation. I need to start looking for an apartment, I said, after I finished the nursery. Can you check the classifieds? Already on it, Sarah replied, holding up a newspaper. There's a complex 5 minutes away with vacancies and a pool. That'll work, I said. Once I'm back at work, my schedule will be brutal. Sarah frowned. Probably why Emily ended up with Michael? But I bet she liked the money, she smirked. You should slow down too. Money isn't everything. It was just after midnight on Friday when Sarah called to tell me she was in labor. I'd moved into a complex a few blocks away, so I made it to her house in under 10 minutes. Despite having rehearsed for weeks, the real thing was pure chaos. In the whirlwind 13 days since we'd met, I had painted the nursery, set up furniture, and picked up a video camera and digital recorder. At the same time, I'd managed my move, gone back to work, and dealt with lawyers' calls on both our cases. Somehow, it was all finally coming together. When we got to the hospital, Sarah insisted I join her in the delivery room. I wasn't exactly eager, but I couldn't bring myself to refuse her. My original plan was to hang around until things got serious, then quietly make my exit. Of course, with the rain pouring down outside, it should have been obvious nothing would go as planned. I stayed by her side, my back turned to the commotion, holding her hand tightly and speaking softly to keep her calm. When the doctor asked if I wanted to cut the umbilical cord, I politely declined, but I was happy to hold the tiny, messy newborn, Lily Elliott, when she was handed to me. She was perfect. Following Sarah's suggestion, I scaled back my work hours, much to the dismay of my firm's partners. My new routine wasn't exactly relaxing, but it was deeply rewarding. I spent most of my time caring for Lily while Sarah worked from her home office. She'd come out every few hours to nurse the baby, and I'd give them their space. I'd always wanted kids, but Emily had consistently pushed the idea down the road, saying we should wait a few more years. Sarah shared that Michael hadn't wanted children either, and had been indifferent, even irritated when she announced her pregnancy. For me, however, being Uncle James to Lily was a role I gladly embraced. Meanwhile, Emily and Michael weren't done causing problems. Their lawyer filed a counterclaim accusing Sarah and me of having an affair. The claim was ridiculous, but the court allowed it to proceed as part of the process. Sarah and I joked about the absurdity, but we knew we'd need to address it eventually. Michael made occasional attempts to see Lily, but despite having full custody, Sarah never blocked him outright. He didn't bother to get official visitation rights, instead calling sporadically to request visits. Each time, Sarah insisted I be present when he came over. Emily, on the other hand, called me twice a week. Sometimes she begged for money, other times she needed help with small things, like setting up her furnace or installing storm windows. When the depositions began, it was hard not to laugh. Emily's lawyer looked more like a college freshman than a professional. He came in with an air of confidence, but he was clearly out of his depth. Fortunately, I had hired a seasoned attorney, an absolute powerhouse in the courtroom. You haven't presented any evidence to substantiate claims of infidelity, the young attorney stated smugly, as if he had the upper hand. She was with another man, I said matter-of-factly. The young lawyer flushed red. That's not accurate, he stammered, flipping through his notes. Legally speaking, infidelity requires, before I could respond, my attorney stepped in, placing a steadying hand on my arm. Allow me to clarify, she said, her tone sharp and professional. Mr. Sears has handled more divorce cases than I can count, and I can assure you he knows exactly what constitutes infidelity. He doesn't need a lecture. The young attorney fumbled with his papers, clearly outmatched. I'll have to bring my case files to our next meeting, I joked. Winking, my attorney smirked. Save it for the courtroom, she quipped, giving me a playful nudge. I turned to Emily, addressing her directly. I've been fair with my offer. You're not going to get a no-fault divorce here, and you know it. My initial proposal was generous, $24,000 in alimony in the house. But since our separation, I've been keeping track of every lie you've told me. For each one, I've reduced the offer by $10. What's left now is $480 per month and the house. If you take this to court, you'll risk losing the house as well. Emily shook her head angrily. I haven't lied to you. I never slept with Michael before we separated. $7 per month, I said, pulling out my notebook and marking down another deduction. Keep going and you'll owe me. Emily's face twisted with rage. Go to hell, she spat. We'll settle this in court. Before we wrapped up, her lawyer decided to try another angle. Did you have a romantic or sexual relationship with Sarah Elliott prior to June 3rd? He asked smugly. I was ready for this one. Absolutely not, I said calmly. I met Sarah on June 4th. She was 9 months pregnant at the time. She's since had her baby, but there has never been anything romantic between us." The lawyer smirked, clearly thinking he had me. "We have photographs of you leaving her house and her leaving your apartment. Are you sure her baby isn't yours?" Before my attorney could intervene, I leaned forward, glaring. "Let me make something crystal clear," I said in a low, dangerous voice. "If I see one camera pointed at me or her, you'll regret it. And Emily, before you reject my offer, maybe you should ask Michael what Sarah does for a living. You have until 5 p.m. Monday to take the deal." By Monday, I hadn't heard from Emily. Instead, I got a summons from Judge Bettina Markle. Apparently, Emily's lawyer had filed a formal grievance about my conduct during the deposition. Sarah wasn't thrilled when Michael sent her a similar demand, accusing her of financial misconduct. In the judge's chambers, Emily's lawyer launched into a dramatic recounting of my supposed offenses. "Your Honor," Mr. Sears threatened an officer of the court, he said indignantly. My attorney, calm and composed, responded swiftly. He wasn't acting as an officer of the court, he was speaking as a plaintiff. "If Mr. Hart continues to approach these cases with such immaturity, I suspect Mr. Sears won't be the last person to lose patience with him." Judge Markle turned to me. "What exactly did you say, Mr. Sears?" she asked. I met her gaze with a straight face. I called him a twit and told him he didn't want me as an enemy. The judge burst into laughter. "Mr. Hart," she said, turning to the young attorney, "being called a twit isn't grounds for disciplinary action. And based on what I've seen so far, I'd say Mr. Sears' assessment was spot on. You don't want him as your enemy." The flustered attorney stammered, his face bright red, before huffing about favoritism and storming out. Judge Markle simply shook her head, amused. Judge Markle's expression sharpened, but I spoke quickly, cutting off whatever she was about to say. "Here's some advice you didn't ask for," I said, keeping my tone cool. "If you want to talk like that to your friends or clients, knock yourself out. But if you bring that kind of attitude into a judge's chambers again, you'd better have an overnight bag ready. I think you know what I mean." The young lawyer stared at me blankly, clearly not understanding. Judge Markle didn't let the silence linger. "Contempt of court," she said flatly. "It means I'll toss you in jail and keep you there as long as I see fit. Mr. Hart, Mr. Sears is absolutely correct. The next time you speak in my chambers, you'd better start with Your Honor, or ma'am, and you'd better check your tone. If you want to play in this league, grow up. We don't have time for tantrums. As for your request, it's denied. File a formal motion if you like, but I'll reject that too. Now get out." Throughout the exchange, Emily sat stiffly in her chair, her face growing paler with every word the judge said. When we left the room, she didn't look at me once. I didn't miss the opportunity to needle her as we walked out. "As for your counteroffer," I said to the top of her head, "don't hold your breath." The following months flew by in a blur of activity. 3 or 4 evenings a week, I found myself at Sarah's house, getting hands-on experience with bottles and diapers. Sarah gradually stepped back from her business, small fry, and gave me crash courses in caring for Lily and my own. It was a win-win. Sarah got some much-needed rest, and I got to spend time with Lily. Even when she was cranky, a short walk around the house and a silly song were all it took to settle her. I wasn't entirely sure what to make of my relationship with Sarah. While I was starting to understand what I wanted it to be, she seemed to see me more as a brother than anything else. For the most part, I treated her in kind. Still, we spent our evenings together once Lily was asleep, watching movies, talking and sharing meals. Whatever we were, it was easy and comfortable, which suited us both just fine. The thought of some tabloid photographer lurking outside made us even more careful to keep things low-key. By January, both divorce cases, Sears vs. Sears and Elliott vs. Elliott, finally landed on the family court docket. Emily had made one last attempt to negotiate with me, but after her stunt with the private investigator, I refused to entertain it. Michael had all but vanished, seemingly too worried about a potential child support case to visit Lily anymore. Sarah was keeping that option in her back pocket for now, as we had the same judge handling both cases. Mine was scheduled for the morning, hers for the afternoon, though we suspected her session would become redundant. The weather seemed to be on our side that day. The skies were clear as Sarah and I entered the courthouse. Emily's counterclaim was quickly dismissed. It was baseless, and the court didn't waste time on it. She did present photos of me leaving Sarah's house and vice versa, but they showed nothing incriminating. Our case was straightforward. Emily had testified during her deposition that she and Michael hadn't been involved before June 3rd. We'd kept our strongest evidence, the videos and emails, reserved as a last resort. Unsurprisingly, we had to play that card. When I testified, I kept my statements vague, hinting at evidence that showed Emily and Michael's relationship began well before June 3rd. On cross-examination, Emily's attorney avoided probing further, which seemed odd. When Emily herself testified, she denied the affair outright, both on direct questioning and cross-examination. Afterward, my attorney stood. "Your Honor, we have a rebuttal witness," she announced. The plaintiff calls Detective Lieutenant David Cooper. Since Mangrove was a rebuttal witness, we hadn't been required to disclose him in advance, leaving the defense with no time to prepare. After taking the oath, Mangrove introduced himself and, not missing a beat, shot me a withering glare. "What's your relationship to the plaintiff?" my attorney asked. "None," Mangrove replied curtly. "Actually, I can't stand him. Do you have any professional ties to him?" She continued. "Not a chance," Mangrove said. "He's a sleazy divorce lawyer. I work criminal cases. When was the last time you interacted with Mr. Sears?" Emily's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection, relevance." The judge raised an eyebrow at my attorney, who calmly responded, "Your Honor, this witness holds key information directly related to Ms. Wendell's testimony. I'm establishing his impartiality and setting the timeline for the court." Mangrove interjected before the judge could rule. "I'm plenty impartial," he growled. "Frankly, I hope she takes him for everything he's got, just like his client did to me." The judge silenced my attorney with a sharp warning, then gestured for the questioning to continue. "When was the last time you saw Mr. Sears?" my attorney asked. His tone measured. Mangrove consulted a notebook before responding. "June 5th. And did he leave anything with you on that day?" My attorney pressed. "Yes," Mangrove replied. "What was it?" my attorney asked. "A compact disc," Mangrove said, his voice neutral. "Do you know what's on the disc?" my attorney inquired. "No," Mangrove replied firmly. "He asked me to hold on to it, had me sign a chain of custody form, and sealed it in an evidence bag. I never looked at it. Has the disc left your custody since then?" my attorney continued. "No," Mangrove said, his tone unwavering. "It's been in my office safe, which only I can access." "Do you have the disc with you today?" my attorney asked finally. Mangrove nodded, producing a sealed evidence bag and the attached chain of custody form. "This is it. We offer plaintiffs Exhibits 1 and 2 into evidence as a rebuttal to Miss Wendell's testimony," my attorney declared. Emily's attorney objected, but the judge overruled it. I glanced at Emily. Her face was ashen, and she whispered frantically to her attorney, who looked equally panicked. "Your Honor," my attorney continued, "the contents of this disc are not suitable for public display. We request an in-camera review. The plaintiff has no further questions for Detective Mangrove." Emily's attorney spent a full 15 minutes attempting to rattle Detective Mangrove, but the effort was wasted. Mangrove was a seasoned professional who had faced far tougher opponents than an overconfident divorce lawyer. He remained steadfast, his testimony unwavering. The judge called for a recess to review the disc and promised a decision by 11:30 a.m. As I stepped into the hallway, I spotted Sarah pacing with Lily nestled in her sling. I gave her a thumbs up as I approached. "Well, looks like this afternoon will be pretty anticlimactic," I said with a grin. "Though I'm sorry you won't get to see Michael's face when he realizes it's over." Sarah smirked, passing the baby to me. "Don't worry, watching him grovel will be just as satisfying." As we chatted, Emily and her attorney emerged from the courtroom, followed closely by Michael and his lawyer. Emily wasted no time. "I'll take the original deal," she said hurriedly. "I still think you're bluffing, but Michael claims Sarah might have cooked something up on the computer." Sarah bristled. "Cooked up?" she snapped. "More like served up. Your lies, your videos, and your emails. That's why we made sure a police officer handled it. You're done and you know it. James knows it, I know it, and now the judge knows it." I placed a hand on Sarah's arm to calm her, but she wasn't finished. Turning to face me, she said sharply, "Don't even try to stop me." They wanted to play dirty, lying, cheating, and trying to take more than they deserved. "Welcome to the big leagues, sweetie. You and your buddy over there bit off way more than you can chew." She turned her fiery glare to Michael. "You'll get half of whatever the judge gives her, minus the house. And if you don't like it, we can run this circus again this afternoon." I'm sure the transcripts will paint a flattering picture of you abandoning your pregnant wife to fool around. You should be grateful James stepped up to help with Lily. Otherwise, you'd be looking at $500 a month in child support. Michael stood speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Even I was momentarily stunned. Sarah was livid and I wasn't about to cross her. Michael's lawyer, sensing how dire their situation was, quickly jumped in. "Half of what she gets, minus the house," he said cautiously. "We'll take it," Sarah smirked. "And Michael gets to cover my legal fees," she added. "It's an at-fault divorce, that's on him." Michael's lawyer gave a reluctant nod. Sarah turned to me, her grin softening. "Should I assume you're billing me for all this advice, counselor? I hear you charge $600 an hour. My attorney says your time is just as valuable as hers." I couldn't help but laugh. Michael, meanwhile, seemed to be doing math in his head, his expression growing darker. Sarah gave my arm a gentle squeeze and led me away from the group. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I shouldn't have spoken for you. I know you don't want her to leave empty-handed, but I think it's what they deserve." Still, I overstepped. I shook my head. "Don't worry about it. You're right and I'm wrong. Take note, it might be the only time I admit that." Sarah's smile widened. "I doubt that. You said the same thing after we painted Lily's room. I told you the colors would be perfect together, and they were." I was about to respond when my attorney approached with an update. "She's ready to settle," my lawyer said, clearly pleased. "She'll take $500 a month in alimony for 2 years, the house, and a quarter of the joint checking account." With Lily strapped to my chest, I shrugged. They don't seem to get it. In an at-fault divorce, she's entitled to no more than a third of the assets. Technically, I could force the sale of the house and claim 2/3 of the proceeds. If she's not careful, she'll be paying my legal fees too. Forget the alimony, we'll wait for the judge. Emily's attorney walked away looking defeated. Emily herself looked on the verge of tears. When the judge returned to the courtroom, her ruling was far harsher than I had anticipated. "Miss Wendell," Judge Markle began, her tone sharp and unforgiving. "I reviewed the contents of the disc and I was appalled. It's evident that you deliberately misled this court in an attempt to secure financial gain. I do not take kindly to such behavior," she continued, her words deliberate and cutting. "Mr. Sears made you several generous offers, all of which you rejected. Instead, you chose to gamble and you lost. The marital assets will be divided as follows: 94% to Mr. Sears, 6% to Miss Wendell. Given that Mr. Sears was the primary earner, alimony is warranted. I order him to pay you $5 a month for the next 2 months. It is also my understanding that Mr. Sears has already paid you $1,000 a month for 7 months. That amount is to be returned to him, minus $10. Judge Markle paused momentarily, her gaze fixed firmly on me. "Additionally, neither party may remove the other as the primary beneficiary on any existing insurance policies. Miss Wendell, you may reside in the marital home for 5 years, during which you will be responsible for all associated costs. After 5 years, the house is to be sold with 75% of the proceeds going to Mr. Sears and 25% to Miss Wendell. An appraisal must be completed within 30 days at Miss Wendell's expense, and any sale below the appraised value will come out of her share. Lastly, Miss Wendell is responsible for all reasonable legal fees incurred by Mr. Sears. His attorney will provide an itemized bill within 60 days. With a decisive bang of her gavel, Judge Markle concluded, "Court is adjourned." I glanced at Sarah, who was seated in the back row, cradling Lily and grinning triumphantly. She nodded toward Emily, who sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face, while Michael slumped behind her, clutching his head as if it might burst. As I walked past Michael, I couldn't resist. "That's one expensive affair," I said loudly to my attorney, ensuring both of them heard. That evening, Sarah and I celebrated by treating our attorneys to dinner. Both lawyers had joked that after securing such favorable settlements, their clients owed them more than just fees. It seemed like a fitting way to wrap up the day. Halfway through dinner, Sarah surprised everyone at the table. "Let them sweat for a bit," she said, swirling her wine glass casually. "Then reach out to Michael's lawyer and offer him a deal. I'll waive the money he owes me, and I won't pursue child support on the condition that he stays completely out of our lives." I raised an eyebrow. "What happened to wanting to crush him underfoot?" I teased. She smirked. "Mission accomplished. But you're the one who told me, if you take everything from someone, they have nothing left to lose. I tilted my head, amused. So now you're quoting me, huh? I said, bouncing Lily gently on my knee. Don't get used to it, she quipped with a mischievous glint in her eye. You're free to give advice whenever you want, but I'm free to ignore it. Nodding, I decided to match her gesture. Do the same with Emily. Let her know I'm willing to walk away from the money tied up in the house. Sarah gave me a thoughtful look. You were right about one thing, she admitted. We earned a lot of goodwill by being reasonable when we had them cornered. We offered them the chance to walk away with their reputations and some dignity intact. Not that they deserved it, and don't expect me to admit you were right again anytime soon. Over the months, I watched Sarah slowly regain her balance. The stress of a messy divorce and the challenges of raising a baby on her own had weighed heavily on her. But as time passed, she found her footing. Christmas had been a difficult season for both of us, and as the court date loomed closer, she'd grown more irritable. Seeing her smile again felt like a victory in itself. I assumed my time with Sarah would naturally decrease now that our shared struggles were behind us. And I was right. After the divorce, I still babysat Lilia a couple of nights a week while Sarah hit the gym or met with colleagues. But my evenings increasingly shifted back to the office. With my 5-year contract at the firm coming to an end in just a few months, I was preparing to strike out on my own by the summer. A few days after the court ruling, Detective David Cooper showed up at my office unannounced. He walked in without so much as a greeting, cutting straight to the chase. She lied, he said bluntly. It wasn't hard to figure out who he meant. I know, I replied. He glared at me. You didn't know when you took her case, he said accusingly. I didn't find out until last year, I admitted. She really had me fooled. For the first time, Mangrove let out a bitter chuckle. She's good at that, he said. So how'd you figure it out? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. You know she remarried, right? He nodded. Well, she pulled the same stunt with her new husband. I looked into him. He was almost 70. There was no way he'd done what she claimed. Mangrove's jaw tightened. There was no way I did either, he said sharply. But that didn't stop you from going after me. I nodded, acknowledging his frustration. Your service record was the sticking point, I explained. Those complaints of excessive force were what swayed the judge. He frowned but said nothing, so I continued. In hindsight, I've realized most good cops have complaints like that on their record. When I found out her new husband's age, I told her I'd take the case, but only if she paid up front. Funny enough, she didn't have the cash and offered other means of payment. Mangrove laughed darkly. Should have taken her up on it and dropped the case anyway. I played it differently, I said. I called my paralegal under the pretense of needing paperwork. She didn't seem to realize offering Zach's for legal services was unethical, or maybe she didn't care. Either way, she was a hell of an actress. Look at how she played both of us. Mangrove shook his head, chuckling again. Well, you can see her talents online now. She has a subscription site. $12 a month gets you full access. I couldn't help but laugh. That's nothing, I said. One peek in your safe, and you'd have had front row seats to my ex-wife's greatest hits. His eyes widened. So that's what was on the disc, he said, shaking his head. If I'd known, we could have turned it into a joint venture. Apparently, Marcy's making a liquidating doing solo acts. I shook my head, unable to hide a wry smile. Why'd I trust you with it? Mangrove asked suddenly. Why not just toss it? Because of your reputation, I said simply. Even when I was trying to prove you were the biggest idiot alive, everyone told me you were a by-the-book cop. He looked taken aback but pleased. I sent a letter, by the way, I added. When I found out what she'd done, I wrote to your captain and the commissioner. Mangrove's brows knitted together. When was that? He asked. Last February or March, I think, I said. Didn't they tell you? He shook his head. But I got promoted to lieutenant in April. Didn't even have to take the exam. Figured it was never going to happen. Look, I'm sorry, I said earnestly. I really thought she was telling the truth. I mean, I missed my wife's affair for almost a year. Mangrove smirked. One thing's certain, if I ever get divorced again, I'm hiring you. In late March, Sarah called my office at 8 p.m. Why are you still at work? She demanded. Didn't we talk about this? Thinking she was joking, I made a snarky comment. I was wrong. You haven't come to dinner in a week, she said sharply. When you watch Lily, you leave the second I get home. Did you learn nothing from your failed marriage? Caught off guard, I stammered an apology. I'm just trying to finish up here. My contract's almost done and I've got 7 weeks of vacation banked. I'm taking it all before June. Good, she said curtly. I'm claiming a week of that for myself. I smiled, trying to ease the tension. What are we painting this time, I joked. Nothing, she snapped. But if you don't want to spend time with us, just say so. Then she hung up. 2 nights after Sarah's abrupt phone call, I arrived at her house feeling somewhat awkward. I was supposed to watch Lily while Sarah went to her workout at the Y. Truthfully, I should have been the one hitting the gym. My diet had devolved into a predictable rotation of takeout meals since I'd stopped sharing dinners with Sarah and Lily regularly. Sarah, on the other hand, looked like she hadn't been pregnant a day in her life, let alone 9 months ago. She opened the door and gave me a look that was hard to read. I wasn't sure you'd come, so I made other plans, she said flatly. Her words stung. When have I ever not shown up? I asked, louder than I meant. When have I ever let you down? When it comes to Lily, Sarah's expression softened immediately. That's not what I meant, she said. I was out of line the other night. I shouldn't have hung up on you, I shrugged. I made a dumb comment and it backfired. Let's call it even, she smiled faintly. Well, good news. Lily has a play date tonight. If it goes well, I'll host the other little girl on Thursday, which means you can come with me to the gym instead. I shook my head, laughing. This physique is a masterpiece in progress, I said. Greasy cheeseburgers, fries, burritos. It's all part of the plan. Wouldn't want to ruin my carefully cultivated roundness with exercise. Sarah smirked. Don't worry, I'll drive. Over the next few weeks, our routine shifted back to something familiar. We resumed having dinner together at least 5 nights a week, alternating between her place and mine. I watched Lily once or twice a week so Sarah could take a break and recharge. After workouts, we'd often stop at the grocery store to restock our kitchens. Sarah made sure my shelves had more than just cereal and frozen waffles during my weeks off. On those weeks, we spent our days entertaining Lily while Sarah worked from home. As Lily's first birthday approached, so did the anniversary of one of the hardest days in both of our lives. I expected Sarah to feel angry or melancholic. It mirrored my own emotions. But if she felt either, she didn't let it show. My life's better now than it was back then, she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on June 3rd. I don't miss him. I sat quietly for a moment before nodding. I don't miss Emily either, I admitted. I miss pieces of the relationship, but not her. Sarah reached over and patted my hand. We're better off without them, she said simply. As I transitioned to starting my own law practice, I found myself reflecting on my evolving relationship with Sarah. What we had didn't fit neatly into any category. Lately, she'd fallen asleep on my shoulder a few times while we watched movies after Lily went to bed. I wondered if my feelings for her were crossing a line, and if they were, whether she felt the same. From what I could tell, Sarah seemed to view me as a safe space, a combination of big brother and trusted protector. Beyond that, I wasn't sure. My emotions were conflicted. Sarah was undeniably beautiful. I enjoyed watching her on the treadmill, noticing her graceful stride and the way her face lit up when she joked or shared an observation. At the same time, she was a friend. We'd spent countless hours unpacking our pasts and sharing our dreams, but our conversations never included each other in future plans. Meanwhile, Emily and Michael had briefly tried living together after their divorces, but eventually split. Last I heard, they were engaged again, but that was months ago, and I hadn't heard any updates. The day I opened my solo practice, Sarah and Lily surprised me by waiting outside my office. I hadn't seen them for a few days. They'd been out of town visiting family, and I wasn't prepared for what they had planned. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I froze. The furniture I'd picked out for the office hadn't arrived. Instead, the space was outfitted with pieces I'd never seen before. The outer office, where my paralegal would work, looked sleek and professional. My own desk, originally a functional but unimpressive piece from IKEA, had been replaced with a stunning walnut desk paired with real leather chairs. Surprise, Sarah said with a grin. This is a gift from Evie and me. I saw the stuff you picked out and couldn't let you do that to yourself. Instinctively, I put an arm around her shoulder. This is amazing, but you really didn't have to spend so much. Sarah waved off my concern. It's just money. We'll both make more. Besides, I'm here to be your first official client. My eyebrow shot up. Really? She nodded. I need a will and guardianship papers for Evie. If something happens to me, I'll go after Michael for child support, but drop it if he signs away his rights. Can you handle that? Of course, I replied, though I wasn't thrilled about mixing business with personal feelings. But you didn't need to bribe me with all this furniture. How did you even pull this off? She smirked. Joan. My paralegal had clearly been in on the plan. Sarah explained, I upgraded your IKEA order and got Joan's key. Dodging you was the hardest part, but it was worth it. I glanced at Lily babbling happily nearby. She's picking up words fast, I said. You might want to watch what you say. Sarah grinned mischievously. Fine. You can be scum-sucker, and I'll be witch. She'll be ready for her teenage years. I shook my head. Let's talk about the will. It's simple, she said. Everything goes into a trust for Lily. Her guardian will also be the trustee. And the guardian? You, she said, without hesitation. I leaned back, surprised. Are you sure? Sarah gave me a look that said the question was absurd. Who else? I smiled, though I felt an unnameable pang. You realize I can't technically take you as a client? I reminded her. Good, she said with a grin. I planned to fire you before I had to pay you anyway. A week later, Sarah and I were in the grocery store when she gave me a curious look. I was tapping a cantaloupe like I knew what I was doing. You've been quiet. What's on your mind? She asked softly. The moment in my office had stuck with me. I didn't just want Sarah and Lily in my life. I wanted them to be at the center of it. But fear of ruining what we had held me back. Spit it out, she prodded. Taking a breath, I asked cautiously, would it be weird if I asked you out? Her expression flickered. Let's talk after we're done here, she said evenly. The rest of the trip was quieter and I regretted asking. By the time we reached the car, I was braced for rejection. As we loaded groceries, Sarah broke the silence. Were you serious about asking me out? She asked without looking at me. Yeah, I admitted quietly. To my surprise, she burst into laughter. Full-blown, can't-breathe laughter. I didn't think it was that funny, I muttered, embarrassed. She waved a hand, catching her breath. It wasn't the question. It was how serious you looked. Still confused, I stared at her. Finally, she straightened and gave me a thoughtful look. Do we spend more time together or apart? She asked. I frowned. Part? Really? She pressed. Think about it. I hesitated. Together, I guess, she nodded. Exactly. And when we're together, what do we do? Talk, play with Lily, have dinner? I trailed off as realization dawned. For months, I thought we were already dating, she said bluntly. At work, I call you my boyfriend. I got so mad when you pulled away after the divorces were finalized. I thought you were waiting to make it official. Then I realized you didn't see me that way. And that pissed me off. I was stunned. I went to the gym, got my pre-baby body back, and you didn't notice. I noticed, I said softly. Oh, I know, she smirked. There are mirrors at the gym. I saw you sneaking glances. Did you notice my workout clothes getting smaller? I nodded, speechless. Well, she teased, I was dressing for someone's attention. You just didn't realize it was yours. The truth hit me like lightning. So what now? I asked awkwardly. Go ahead, she said, smiling. Ask me out. I shook my head, hiding a smile. Never mind, changed my mind. Even after Sarah's playful invitation, we didn't rush into anything. Life with Lily, now a spirited 15-month-old, kept things interesting. Precocious didn't do her justice. I spent 2 days child-proofing Sarah's house, but Lily undid my efforts faster than I could improve them. Life with the two of them was chaotic, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Lily quickly mastered removing outlet covers, unlocking baby gates, and rummaging through kitchen cabinets. Each time she figured something out, she'd grab our hands to proudly show off her new skill. Sarah would laugh, shaking her head, while I often wondered if Lily was imitating me. Until she opened a cabinet, I couldn't figure out myself. Playpens were no match for Lily. She treated them like challenges to escape. A playmate offered brief moments of peace, but its novelty wore off quickly, except for the noisy sections which endlessly entertained her. Sarah and I lugged that mat back and forth between our homes, chasing fleeting quiet. Whenever Lily pushed my patience to the edge, she'd melt it away with a spontaneous hug or an innocent, wide-eyed look. Staying annoyed was impossible. Sarah had the same knack for disarming me with a glance. 2 weeks after our car conversation, Sarah asked me to stay over. Nothing in our routine had changed. But looking back, I realized she was right. We'd been dating for over a year without calling it that. I just hadn't let myself see it. That night, I saw Sarah's natural beauty more clearly than ever. Her faint stretch marks only added to her allure. They were a part of her story, and to me, they made her even more captivating. When she entered the bedroom in a short white nightgown, I was momentarily speechless. Her slight hesitation as I took her in made me wonder if my reaction gave her confidence or made her self-conscious. Either way, I couldn't look away. Our first kisses were tentative, testing uncharted territory. It had been over a year since either of us had experienced closeness, and we both understood the weight of the moment. I was nervous about doing something wrong, but from the passion that followed, I knew I hadn't. When she woke me later that night for another tender moment, I was sure of it. Being with Sarah was unlike anything I'd known. She wasn't passive or uncertain. She knew what she wanted and communicated it effortlessly. She wasn't forceful either. Instead, she responded with a depth that made it clear we were perfectly in sync. Our connection only deepened over time. In September, Michael and Emily married, and predictably, Sarah and I weren't invited. True to form, Michael signed away his parental rights without hesitation when Sarah offered to absolve him of child support. He barely glanced at the papers before signing, eager to sever ties. Sarah handled it calmly, but I was furious. How could anyone abandon their child so easily? I officially agreed to be Lily's legal guardian if anything happened to Sarah, and updated my will to create a trust for her. Our relationship had grown into something I never expected. Sarah embodied everything I admired in a partner. I couldn't tell if time had shifted my perspective or if we were just a perfect match, but I wasn't questioning it. Sarah seemed equally happy, showing her affection in small, meaningful ways. A touch of her hand as we walked, a brush of fingers on my arm, leaning against me while we watched Lily play. I found plenty of excuses to hold her or steal a playful touch when we were alone. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we had a talk about our future. While we both had ideas, making them official was daunting. Both of us had been through failed marriages. Mine lasted barely 2 years, hers less than 18 months, with both unraveling when our spouses cheated. Our pasts weren't encouraging, but this felt different. I didn't compare Sarah to Emily, and she didn't see Michael when she looked at me. I think I figured out why this feels different, I said one evening, breaking a comfortable silence. She tilted her head. Why's that? Our lives are like intersecting circles, I explained. In past relationships, the circles were concentric. Everything revolved around one person. But with us, our circles overlap meaningfully while still leaving space for individuality. There's balance. Sarah thought for a moment, then nodded. You're right. Michael and I didn't have that. He wanted everything to revolve around us, and he couldn't handle me wanting space. When I started working, she trailed off, but I understood. Emily didn't have friends who weren't mine first, I said. She started golfing because I did, not because she liked it. And I didn't even love golf. It just gave me time alone. She couldn't see that I wasn't trying to get away from her. I just needed a break. Sarah smiled thoughtfully. I like the idea of intersecting circles. I hope she always would. When we exchanged wedding bands later, they were crafted with that very idea in mind. 2 distinct rings woven together in perfect harmony. It felt just right. In the end, the story of James, Emily, Michael, and Sarah serves as a powerful reminder of the unpredictable events in life that can shake us to our very core. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and often we find ourselves standing at crossroads that we never anticipated. These events can test our resolve, challenge our beliefs, and force us to confront aspects of ourselves that we may not even know exist. James, Emily, Michael, and Sarah's journey is no exception. A narrative that begins with an unimaginable betrayal and ends with a profound lesson about the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the strength to start over. James, a man who had spent most of his life valuing independence and hard work, found his world shattered one fateful day when he walked in on his wife, Emily, tangled in a compromising situation with her boss, Michael. The heartache and betrayal he felt in that moment were indescribable. His mind raced, his emotions spiraled out of control, and the life he thought he knew, the relationship he thought was built on trust, crumbled before him. How could this happen? Why would Emily, the woman he loved, betray betray him in the worst way possible. His heart, torn between anger, hurt, and disbelief, struggled to find a way forward. But what really mattered in that moment was not the pain of betrayal or the shock of what he had just witnessed. What truly mattered was how James would rise from this gut-wrenching experience, how he would navigate the tumultuous sea of emotions, and how he would continue on his path toward healing. While the wounds ran deep, the decision to stay trapped in anger and bitterness was not an option for him. Instead, he chose a different path, a path towards self-discovery, growth, and ultimately, healing. Emily, on the other hand, was not prepared for the consequences of her actions. She had believed that she could live a double life, keeping her affair with Michael a secret while maintaining the illusion of a happy marriage with James. But her world too was about to come crashing down. As the layers of her deceit unraveled, Emily was faced with the harsh reality of her choices. It was no longer about maintaining appearances. It was about confronting the truth, taking responsibility, and understanding the weight of the damage she had caused. And then there was Michael, the man who played a central role in this tragedy. At first, he appeared to be the catalyst for the breakdown of James and Emily's marriage. But as the story progressed, it became clear that Michael's actions were driven by his own insecurities and desires. His own sense of morality and commitment had been compromised, and his affair with Emily was not just about betrayal, it was a reflection of his own internal struggles. Like Emily, Michael had to face the consequences of his actions, and the guilt that weighed on him grew heavier with each passing day. However, amid all the chaos, there was Sarah. Sarah, who was caught in the same web of lies and betrayal as James. She too was left to pick up the pieces of her broken marriage when she discovered Michael's infidelity with Emily. But unlike James, who had been blindsided by his wife's actions, Sarah had a quiet strength. She didn't let her pain define her. Instead, she chose to take action. She became an unexpected ally to James, and together they forged a bond rooted in shared experiences and mutual support. Sarah's strength, her resilience in the face of betrayal, became a beacon of hope for James. Through their journey, they learned that true healing comes not just from confronting the past, but from learning to forgive, to let go of the anger, and to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. As their paths intertwined, both James and Sarah discovered something that neither of them expected. They found peace in their shared pain. Through their bond, they learned that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for forgiveness. They discovered that resilience is not just about bouncing back from hardship, but about growing stronger from it, learning from it, and using those lessons to guide us forward. Their story was no longer just one of betrayal and heartache. It became one of redemption, of finding love again, not just in others, but in themselves. Forgiveness, resilience, and the power to love again are not easy to come by. But once we find them, they become a source of strength that can carry us through even the most difficult times. James and Sarah's journey taught them that healing is not a destination, but a process of learning, growing, and becoming better versions of ourselves. They had to confront their own vulnerabilities, face the pain of their past, and ultimately choose to let go of what no longer served them. Through this story, we are reminded that we all have the capacity to rise above the challenges life throws our way. Whether it's the betrayal of a loved one, the loss of trust, or the heartbreak of a broken relationship, we all have the strength within us to rebuild, to find happiness again, and to move forward with our heads held high. It's not about avoiding the pain, it's about embracing it, learning from it, and using it to propel us toward a better future. If this story has touched you deeply, reminding you of the importance of forgiveness, the power of resilience, or the strength we can find during tough times, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll be part of a community that is committed to sharing stories of strength, healing, and personal growth. Each video we share is not just a story, it's an invitation to join us on a journey of self-discovery and transformation. So, hit that subscribe button now and don't miss out on the next inspiring story that will remind you of the importance of never giving up, no matter what life throws your way. Together, let's continue to explore the depths of human emotions, uncover the stories that shape us, and share the lessons that can guide us toward a brighter, more meaningful future. Let's keep this journey going, and let's share these life lessons with the world.